All right, we are live. My name is Jerry Cabazzuto from godislovetruthlife.com or godislovetruthfreedom.com because a life without freedom is not a life worth living. And I am here today with Colin Davis. How are you?
Hi, Jerry. I'm good. Yeah, it's great to hang out with you.
Absolutely. And we connected through soundpath.org, which is an online freedom uh, music festival, basically. And I initially went to Melissa Mari Music. That's Melissa, Mari music.com,
Hmm.
to see if we could use some of her music for the festival. And then I realized that um, not only were you guys together, but you also had done work together.
Hmm. Yeah. We're both musicians, lifelong musicians. I'm also an audio engineer, a music producer. And so I was Melissa. I don't know if the audience may or may not know about Melissa, my wife. She's not with us anymore. She passed early this year, very unfortunately. She had cervical cancer, and we can talk about her story too. But in regards to music, yes, we had a band together called the O1 Experience, 01experience.com. And we also had a second band, even heavier band called Deprogram Matrix. And I knew Melissa for 17 years. I was with her for 12 years. I was her producer, and we just did. We're also psycho-spiritual investigators and authors of books on shadow work, and so we just had a lot of, we just did everything together. That we were a team, and so yeah, it's a big shock for me. But now it's definitely. I'm making this film about her right now, and part of my job, I feel, is to introduce Melissa to people who didn't know about her, and sort of be her storyteller. And so that's kind of what I'm doing here.
Absolutely. And I think it's beautiful that you continue to honor her legacy, and that you also, we should plug shadowtechalchemy.com.
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned 01experience.com earlier.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. 01experience.com. It's kind of a prog, kind of like Opeth or something like that. There's one EP out. It's very kind of dark and brooding. It's about the Negrito, the alchemical stage of the Negrito, which is sort of it's the first stage, and it's the shadow stage. So that EP is on the website there, and it's also, you can also go to I'm uploading all of Melissa's music. Melissa had Melissa wrote hundreds of songs in her life, and I'm sort of pulling it all together. I've got a few albums up there now. I've got stuff from the 80s and 90s of hers up there. Well, I should say where it is. It's not at o1experience.com. It's at melissamari.bandcamp.com. Yes, melissamari.bandcamp.com is where I'm sort of compiling her music from different eras. And so that EP by the O1 Experience is there. Her 80s music that she did with Mark Power, World Unite Now, that's up there. Two bands that she had in the 90s are up there. And so people can go to that, melissamari.bandcamp.com, and they can listen or buy her music there. And I'll be putting more up there as time goes on.
Excellent.
Yeah.
We sort of briefly talked about, what we would, what topics we would cover today.
I was just thinking, though, Jerry, maybe we should play some music. So for people that don't know Melissa, they can right now, like, hear her, see her, and hear her.
Yeah, let's do it.
And then we'll come back and talk about it.
Sure, no problem.
Okay, great.
All right, so I guess I will start. Which song did you want to discuss first?
Well, Well, what do you think? You want the red pill one, resist all tyranny. The behind the mask one is also a red pill one. It's like about the shadow of the culture. And then there's Let It Go, which is like a ballad, you know, and it's kind of deep and symbolic. And so whatever one you want to pick is fine.
Yeah, I'm thinking that we do the one about shadow work, since you were just talking about
Oh, okay.
that, the
That's
behind the
behind
mask.
them. Yeah, go ahead. There you go. Yeah.
Awesome. Here we go.
Okay.
We own your body from day one. We crush your mind in a box of lies. Until you're willing to die for us and love your servitude. A pound of flesh is worth more than gold. Your sacrifice is a
Hello.
I wanted to
Yeah.
make sure I got that last part. Yeah, tell me more about this song and
Yeah, I hope it came through because it was kind of glitching on my end, and it was
oh
pretty loud
no.
too. The audience we'll find out later. Yeah. Also, the animation on that song is by Lubomir Arsov, and it's just an incredible. And that's what that was is that was an animated film that came out in I don't know when it came out, 2015 or something like that, around there, around the time that we were writing that song. And I don't know, I found it online. It's gotten a lot of views, probably like 10, 15 million views, and it's really brilliant. And oh, I know what it was. We saw I know what it was. We saw the animated film, and we decided to write the song. I think that's what it was. I contacted him and asked him if I could. I don't remember exactly kind of how it came together, but I contacted Lubomir. We wrote the song around that animation, and then he let us use it in our live performance first, and then later in the music video. And so that's kind of what that is. And that song has been through a couple incarnations, and so that was the last version of that song that made it to a music video. But yeah, so inshadow.net. I hope he's still got the website running. I'm going to look and make sure. But that's yeah. So that's. Oh, look, he's got his website down right now. You can find it on YouTube. Just put in shadow animated film. I'll be right there. But yeah, so that's what that is. Yeah.
Yeah, well, firstly, on a sort of musical level, I feel like you guys have a really connected sound with that, like with the drums and like the
Right.
guitars and she's almost sort of like operatic at points, and then she's like metal in others.
Yeah.
It's just like such a great
Yeah.
divine masculine, feminine
Yeah.
oscillation.
Well,
And
yeah, I'm come from, I have a death metal band called Vile, and I'm a metal music producer. And Melissa was in a metal band called Death Under Fire for 10 years. Before that, she did all kinds of other kinds of music, but she did metal for 10 or more years. And so, yeah, we're both pretty experienced in that area. So we kind of knew what to do. Yeah.
Yeah, and then obviously the lyrics of the song, this idea that the masks we wear, the sort of brainwashing and programming, and then the literal the pandemic masks.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, because the song was written before the and the and the video, the animation was made before coronavirus. That we added in, like, once this there's actually a number of syncs in our life that kind of were materialized with the whole pandemic thing and all of that. But yeah, that song was Behind the Mask it was not written by us or by Lubomir about pandemic masks. It was like what you said. It's about your persona. It's your psychological mask that you wear. That you have this mask, this persona that here I am. I'm a normal person. I'm a good person. Blah blah blah. But then, what's behind the mask? What's in your shadow? What's all the stuff, the nasty, evil stuff that's leaking out? And then collectively, the video is about collectively how we all are leaking a certain amount of shadow material out, and then that collectively metastasizes into the general state of integrated evil that we see in the world. Yeah. And so, and in that video, Lubomir, he brilliantly, just incredibly brilliantly, gives you a little vignette, or like a little snapshot of every type of shadow material that we have, every type of shadow manifestation that in our society, whether it's the sexual stuff, or whether it's the propaganda on TV, or it's the gluttony and the greed, or
Music industry.
music industry, people being sheeple, and just on and on and on. He's got like 200 different ways in which we are corrupted as people. Yeah.
I have more follow-up questions about shadow work, but do you want me to hold off on those?
No.
Or
Whatever you want
yeah,
to do. Yeah.
yeah. And we'll for sure play our other two songs for today. But I am curious about how I mean, you guys have done so much together, like how the journey sort of like evolved to include shadow tech alchemy.
Okay, so we're musicians, right? That's kind of like our life for all these years, and but we were also both working on ourselves, psychologically. Just before we even hooked up. I think I met Melissa in 2007 or 2008. We worked together on some. I worked with her other band, and we just kind of had just a correspondence, every couple 3 times a year we'd talk on the phone or whatever and touch base and stuff like that. But we were working on ourselves. Melissa had a difficult background, a difficult childhood and background. And she had been, working on herself one way or another for years. She had actually had cancer an earlier time, and it didn't really metastasize. She beat it back with nutrition and all of that. She was really into health and nutrition. And she was, she was always, I think mainly she was kind of psychoanalyzing herself. She was into spiritual stuff, like she was into Yogananda and sort of Eastern spirituality and all of that. But she said she was always very self-aware, analyzing herself, and then putting it into her lyrics. So that was kind of like the main way that she was kind of moving through her shadow material, integrating her shadow material, was just self-analysis, journaling, and then putting it into her lyrics. And she did that from the earliest days. Me, I also had a difficult upbringing, but maybe not as difficult as Melissa's. But I had a big old crash, a big dark night of the soul when I was 35. And a whole lot of stuff, a relationship crashed at the same time. My business crashed, my band crashed, everything crashed at once. And so I started reading Jungian psychology. And I started with Robert Johnson's book, Owning Your Own Shadow. And so that kind of got me down that track. And I was also a legal researcher, and I was working in that field, as a side job, and I was already an engineer. And so I was kind of already had the kind of, magician archetype running, you could say. And so I just started to focus myself on psychology and try to, get my mind around, the dynamics of the psyche and stuff, and how can you, when you have a big crash, one of the big questions you have to ask yourself is, how did I not see this coming? Right? Because once you crash, then you see all the red flags that you didn't see before. And so you have to ask yourself, how did I not see these things that are so obvious to me now? Like with this woman that I had this relationship with, who's borderline woman. And and I'm like, well, all the signs were all there, and I just ignored them over and over again. Or with my business, or with my band, or what are the other things that were crashing? How did I not see these things before? So what is it about my psyche? What is it about my mind, my ego, to where I have blind spots? Which is another way of saying what the shadow is. The shadow is what's in your blind spots. So you really have to ask yourself, when you have a crash, you have to ask yourself, what do I not know about myself, and how did this occur to me? Because obviously there are parts of me that were that I obviously don't understand, because those parts are what got me in this situation in the first place. I'm the one who found myself in this situation. I'm the one that did this to myself, but I wasn't conscious of the fact that I was doing that to myself. So what was it inside of me that was running me into this destructive direction? So you have to ask yourself, and then you have to go investigate those aspects of yourself, your shadow, so to speak. So I was doing that, and I was always self-aware, and I was always kept a journal, and I was always kind of just self-aware and studying myself just naturally. But this phase that started in about 2005 or something is when I was really trying to understand myself much better. So that was kind of the background. And then we met a few years later, and then Melissa and I got together in late 2012. And by that time, I had maybe 7 or 8 years of serious study in this area. And I had some vocabulary from Jungian psychology, and I kind of had some basic framework to work with as far as psychoanalyzing yourself. And then I learned about Melissa's background, and I learned about what I saw clearly, that she was also very introspective and self-reflective, and so we basically recognized immediately, hey, wait a minute. This is the first relationship that either of us have had with another person who is actually interested in healing themselves, understanding themselves, and healing themselves. And so we shouldn't waste this opportunity. So we just really dove into, together as a team. We psychoanalyzed each other. We talked about each other's backgrounds. We looked at what patterns were, cycling patterns throughout life that we had, and we just really tried to map it out. And I used the terminology and the maps that I learned from Jungian psychology, but it forced us to go into new areas, and we started studying other stuff. And then once we realized that what we were doing was shadow work, and I just really kind of went down that whole rabbit hole, reading Jung's stuff on the shadow and other Jungians on the shadow, Robert L. Moore, and I found Paul Levy and his whole understanding of Wetiko, and that clicked in there, and Eckhart Tolle's understanding of the pain body, and that clicked in there, and how trauma, splits you internally. We later found internal family systems, and we just started stacking more and more understandings onto the basic Jungian framework that we had, until we basically really could kind of map out our own dark sides, our own woundedness. And then we eventually, I put out this book. It was so serious. We got so serious about it. I mean, that there's this book, Shadow Tech. We put this out in late 2015, and this was 2.5 years of us just deep diving into our psychology, and not just into our psychology, but this is sort of a meta map of basically what I did with that book is I was already interested in integral theory and spiral dynamics and stuff. And so I basically said, okay, so if the shadow is the psychological dark side, and it's where you hold your wounds and all of the things that you don't want to show to the world, like in that video, the shadow is the opposite of the persona. So, if that's in the psychological domain, then where is the shadow in the culture? Where is the shadow in the body? Where is the shadow in the civilization itself? And so and then what is the archetype of the shadow, the archetype of evil? And I related it to parasitism, which is a very common relationship profile in the biosphere. And I just started snapping these motifs together to kind of try to make kind of a meta map of the shadow that was more than just psychology, but it reached out into the whole culture. And then later, eventually, I'll show you another book. I took me years to really snap it together in a really clean way. And then this book came out in 2024, Transforming Darkness. And this is where I really kind of, I think, clicked it together in a really clean way that's not as, maybe not as metaphysical as the first book, but is maybe more scientific. But yeah, so this whole thing of not only just working on ourselves and digging up our own stuff, but understanding it in a holistic way, and how the shadow is basically the personal correlate of what we call evil in society, and then basically how it all kind of, how it works. And originally we called the active aspect of the shadow the virus. Then it manifested as the virus, and all of that, which was really, can talk about my sort of analysis of that. But anyway, that's kind of the whole thing. And so we found ourselves basically as, we learned as we were, see what it was is the best way that I can kind of describe what happened with me and Melissa is to describe it in the context of artists who work together and create great art together. So in my experience, it's through music. And so everybody knows all the stories of the great bands, the great bands, the Fleetwood Macs or the Rolling Stones or whatever, the great bands of all time, and how you get artists together who are in sync, psychologically in sync, and they're clicking with the culture and everything, and then they just become channels, and music just comes out of them. They don't know where it comes from. It just comes out. And then this music is created, and all art, collaborative art is that way. But it's the same creative process with people just by themselves too. But anyway, so we both had that experience of when music just comes out of a collaboration, just like out of nowhere. Well, what was happening with us when we first got together is this metaphysics and psychology was coming out of us in the same way. We were just talking about it all the time. Oh, check this out. I found this book, or I found this other person that's talking about what we're talking about. Let's listen to them. And then, oh, wow, I realized. And we're just like that. And we were going for nature walks. Like, there's so many great nature places in the Bay Area, California Bay Area. We were just always going to great nature walks and stuff, and just talking and just downloading and just, whoa, okay, well then if that means that, well then what does that mean, and blah blah blah, and just really being alchemists is what we later called ourselves. And we're doing spiritual alchemy, I mean, by definition. And so we were just downloading, and it's like we both had some background to kind of point us in this direction. We were both always spiritual and mainly interested in Eastern stuff, but we had that background. And then we kind of came together, and we were old enough. Melissa was older than me at the time. She had just turned 50 and I was 43. And this would have been early 2013, late 2012. And we were just at the right place, the right time. And it's just like, it's just like the Rolling Stones making music together. It's like me and Melissa, we were like Mick Jagger and Keith Richards. And it's just like, we just boom, we were just like on fire. And then it moved into music. And then we, got back into doing music together and all of that. And we were just, our whole relationship, which was 12 years, was just on fire the whole time. And so, and it was really just unbelievable, really. And what all the stuff we created, and it was just pretty amazing. But we didn't ask for that. That's just what happened. And then we thought that we thought that with both the music, we took the philosophy, the metaphysics, and we put it into the music. We were naive in thinking that if we do all this, great work on the shadow, psychologically, philosophically, put it together in a new way, put it out in books, and then put it out in music, we thought there would be an audience. We thought people would be like, wow, cool. You know, these guys are demystifying the dark side of consciousness and putting it into art. But it scared people. It just unconsciously, people are like, whoa, what is this? You know? And it was at that point that we really discovered how sort of shallow and superficial American society is. I mean, we already knew that, obviously. We already knew that, of course. But it really dawned on us at that point. And we're like, wow, you know, this culture needs this kind of information. And we're demystifying this very difficult area. It seems like people would be, you know, thankful and wanting to, you know, learn some of our practices and stuff that we were using on ourselves. And we did some workshops for some groups, and we did some lectures and stuff, but we did some stuff and everything. And, you know, Sean Stone interviewed us, and, you know, we did some stuff, but there was still a lot of unconscious pushback from people. And now, you know, that was 2015 when the book came out. And now here we are, 2025, 10 years later. And we're just now starting, I'm just now on social media, starting to see, you know, the kind of stuff that we were talking about 10 years ago is starting to churn up. And so people are starting to go, oh, shadow work. Oh, I got to work on myself? And what?
Right.
Oh, you know, whoa, you mean I'm the cause of all my own problems? What? It's not, I can't just blame somebody else out there. You know, so we were just, and it's not like we're the most advanced people, because we were influenced by other people who were more advanced than us.
Right.
But we were still just ahead of the curve. And so that was a frustration, is that what we were totally, you know, passionate about was there was cognitive dissonance with the culture. And we were like, what community can accept this? Is this the spiritual people? You know, they're the ones, you know, the spiritual people that talk about divine masculine, divine feminine, all the, you know, the new age people, the new version of the new age people that's out now. Are those the ones? They're taking ayahuasca and stuff. Are those the people that can hear this? Or is it the Jungian community? Can they hear it? Or is it the red pilled people? Because we're like all three of these things at once. We're like all of these things. And we didn't really find any community was really clicking with us. And it's like doing music, if we were just going to do music and not make it deep, you know, heavy metal music, well, we had that community already. We're already accepted in that community. We could play that, tour, and all that kind of stuff. But when it came to the psychological stuff, then we just found, you know, people push back on that unconsciously. Nobody ever consciously said, oh, you're scaring me, don't talk about that. You know, it wasn't that. But it was just like, there was just like a... And now I understand how it works. I understand. We were naive in thinking that this was going to be easy, you know, to get out there. So there's a little bit of story for you there on that.
I love it. Well, firstly, I'm just hearing you talk about both of you just essentially going through what I'm hearing is the trivium, going through the input process of gaining the knowledge, doing the self-aware sort of inventory, journaling, processing, you know, trying to understand the material, and then sharing it through books, through, you know, workshops, through connecting with communities, through music. And I mean, that's basically the trivium, I would say. And this idea that, you know, people like it, whenever someone has a sort of false ego defense reaction, like, and we've talked about this, like it's offline. And you were on, I want to plug your appearance on Dissolving the Divide with Derek Bartolicelli, who was unable to join us today, as well as Leslie Powers. So make sure to check out their work, Dissolving the Divide. Derek Bartolicelli's, is also involved with Soundpath, our watch parties and Awaken Your Mind. Anyway, and Leslie Powers is also doing amazing work.
She's a friend of ours.
Reviving Sophia's Circle. She's got, you know, Dissolving the Divide as well. She was also on the Girls Club. She's just a very prolific
Melissa
podcaster.
did some talks with Leslie on Girls Club, and We're in there.
Nice.
Leslie was here actually a couple months ago.
Oh,
Yeah,
lovely.
for Leslie and Stephanie and Scott, so we're here for. But
Awesome.
anyway, go ahead. Yeah.
Well, I was just basically going to say, like, sort of going back to this idea of like the false ego defense reaction, that's basically like you're saying, hey, check out these wounded parts that you might have. And it's like, no, I don't want to
Yeah.
have anything to do with that.
Right.
You're reminding me of things that I don't want to look at, and
That's
I
right.
don't want to work on that.
That's right.
And
I don't know where to start.
Like,
it's not in our culture.
right.
It's not in our culture. Working on. I mean, the science of psychology itself is like what 150 years old or something like that, right? I mean, Freud isn't the beginning of it, but late 1800s, starting with hypnosis and stuff like that, and then just the discovery that there is an unconscious, that not all of your mind is conscious, and that you have recall to. The discovery of the unconscious itself, and then Jung's understanding that the unconscious is an autonomous entity or an autonomous ecosystem far greater than the conscious mind, and that it's doing things that are impossible or very difficult for the conscious mind to understand, and it's driving us, and we're not really the drivers of our own lives. The driving impulses and patterns are in the unconscious, and that the unconscious speaks with a different language than the conscious mind. And so that understanding is less than 100 years old. And then before that, when you go back into Western history, you go into the alchemists and the Hermetic philosophers, and there's all kinds of sort of semi-psychological stuff. It's kind of mixed up with mythology. It's like mythology and psychology kind of mixed together. And you can kind of go back, but you don't really have any kind of dedicated science of understanding yourself that really has a tradition in the West. Whereas in the East, you've got that for days. You've got that for thousands of years. You've got, Indian, Chinese, Eastern, all kinds of Eastern practices, Eastern, internal alchemy practices and yogas and all of this to understand the unconscious. And so we in the West, the East is more collectivist and more internal, and the West is more individualistic and external. And so, and when you start, going to Westerners, and it's only a small amount of Westerners really that are inclined to go in this direction. And so even though we've neglected our inner state for so long, and we have such a shallow understanding of our own unconscious, of our own psychology, we need these understandings, we need these practices, we need these healing modalities, but we're so cultural, they're so culturally alien to us, and that we're just like, whoa, we don't know where to start. And then you have the pressures from the Matrix, or whatever you want to say, where they would rather sell you pills than in the 60s, I think maybe the peak of really of psychology, where psychologists were really trying to be competent, really investigating, and they were really curious, and they were it's sort of the peak of psychological curiosity and inventiveness was in the, you know, mid 20th to late 20th century, you know.
Right.
And then once the drugs came in and all of that, and psychiatry sort of pushed psychology away, and because psychology, you know, because is not, you know, scientific in the same way that you know, drugs and other kinds of medicine are,
Right.
then that was prejudiced. And now we just have the state of affairs in that field is just pitiful. We're just in a pitiful state, and we're in such dire need of deep, introspective, high quality experts, you know, and we just don't have them. They're so few and so far between. So people need this help, and they need this sort of, because we don't have it integrated into the culture. There's a certain, you know, demographic of mental health practitioners, professionals who are handling this, and they're doing it so badly that it's like no one knows where to go.
Right.
And we can't, and so everyone's kind of on their own. And then you get all kinds of, you know, YouTube healers and stuff like that, and they're just, you know, just trying to figure it out like anybody. And so that's kind of just where we are right now. We just cannot rely on the professions to give us modalities and understandings. And yeah, we're just going to have to kind of do it from the underground level and kind of just figure it out ourselves, and just kind of have to use our own best judgment to kind of try to figure out, okay, does this person have something, you know, useful that I can use? Okay, let me bring that in. Does this person, and doing your own research, obviously, and really taking this exploratory work seriously, because we are still in a very exploratory phase. But yeah, that's kind of the situation, you know, with our culture, and where we are with all of that, and we're really sick, and we really need help, and there's no one really to help us except ourselves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We have a shout out that you're always insightful. Absolutely. Yes, I agree. You are insightful. I'm so honored to be speaking with you and to be
It's my
hearing
pleasure.
about, yeah. About, by the way, you and I have had like hour-long conversation, like several
Yeah,
hour-long conversations
we've
before. Like,
talked. Yeah.
you're a cool person. I
Oh, well,
just
thank you. I think you are
feel
too.
your energy, and I was telling you, like, I know that there's been a transition, but I do feel the love that you guys shared. I honor that. I think it's beautiful, and I
Thank you.
wish I had met her here in this incarnation. You know.
Yeah, believe me, Melissa was just an incredible person, just an incredible human being, and incredible muse for me, and just so, I mean, so stoic. So, I mean, Melissa had you know, the term, the O1 experience, the 0-1 experience. This is actually, she actually had a band with Mark Power called One, O-N-E. They ended up changing it to One, W-U-N, Worlds Unite Now. But it was about, you know, the oneness of all reality. But she came up with the name the O1 experience. And at that point, O1 to us meant the duality principle, the 0 and the 1, and it's written about in our books. And so and in Melissa's life, Melissa was very much kind of on this duality trip. And so on one hand, you know, she had a history from all the way back from being an infant of getting sick, and there was a pattern or a part in her. Using the internal family systems model, we call it a part. There was a part in her that we called sick girl. And Sick Girl came online very early. And Melissa had many, many episodes of sickness, or alternatively, of getting into destructive relationships and having to run away from those, or depression and all of this. So she had this cycle, and then we later attributed it to the archetype of Persephone. And she had this kind of a cycle where she would just she would have her, so that, well, let me just say it like this. That was the downside. She had the depressive side, or the sick girl side, and that was like the downside, and that was constantly, going. She was looping through that, cycling through that,
going through Hades and up to
going to
spring,
Hades, and then
renewal.
she would spring back again. She would pull herself together, and that's why she developed so much strength, so much this warrior energy and stoicism and just power to just pull herself out of either physical sickness or to some abusive relationship, and pull herself out of it, get in another band, and just get on stage and just be just badass. Like, she's just such a it's just from the very beginning, and people that see the movie, when I put it out, will see this. But Melissa was, it's almost a shock that she wasn't, one of the most famous, well-known, rock performers, because she was such a badass on stage. And even though she had self-esteem issues and self-confidence issues, in real life, you put her on stage, all that disappears. She's completely taken over by the performer archetype, and she's just running the stage. She's like Tina Turner or whatever, and she's just running it. And or James Brown, or something. She's just Mick Jagger. She's just running that thing. And and she experienced complete and total ecstasy that way. And she just, was able to have both sides of the coin. The creative side, also music just came through her. She was just a clear channel. She was able to write music extremely easily, always original, always new. It was just constantly coming out of her. And, there's no way somebody like me could actually produce all the music that came out. Some of it she'd put into like, once we figured out, Facebook Live and that kind of stuff, she would just write songs and put them out that way, just perform solo. But, so that was the creative side, just being this musical genius and performance genius. And so she had that, and she would cruise on that for a while, and then Hades would pull her back down again. And then she'd be down there for a few years or something, and then she'd be back out of that and be another life. When I met her, she said she felt like she was a cat with 9 lives, and that she felt like she was on her 9th life, because she had such a dynamic life. So that was just that was Melissa. And when she got sick this last time, when she got this cervical cancer tumor, everyone really thought, oh, well, Melissa's just another one of her cycles. You know what I mean? She's going to beat this one back like she does all of them, and she's going to be back on it again in a couple of years. But that wasn't the case. We thought it was going to happen that way. It made sense, but she also kind of knew, her dad died at age 54 of colon cancer. And she always kind of suspected that thing was back there. She called it the family virus. And she thought, well, this thing might get me. It might get me. And she was always kind of, over the years, every time she would have another little mini cycle, she would use that opportunity to sort of just let go to attachments of all kinds. Attachments to this life, attachments to career stuff or anything, and just let go. And so she was always practicing letting go until the final, time when she really needed to do that. And so it was, this was her pattern. It was a Persephone thing that was going on. And, I didn't know that it was going to happen on my watch. I didn't know that this was going to happen. And the whole time that she was sick for 2 years, I thought, well, for a year of it, she was actually still operating pretty normally. So, but I thought, yeah, we're going to beat this back. I never even thought that it was just going to, And then what ended up happening was she ended up just after having this pain for almost 2 years, just suddenly she just stopped being able to keep food down, keep food and water down. She kept puking it up, and her whole bowel system just shut down. And in a period of, we put her in the hospital in a period of a week of that at home, and then 2 weeks in the hospital, 1 day in hospice. And it was just like, it only took her 2 weeks. Yeah, 3 weeks total from the time where she went from still being pretty functional and everything with pain, but functional, to being out of here. It just only took 3 weeks. Her system just shut down. And there was no obstructions. There was no answer. The doctors had no answer. It was just that her soul was like, okay, I did my play. I did my 3 acts or whatever it is, or my 9 lives. And now I'm out of here. And it kind of coincided. I might have told you, I've told a lot of other people, that it kind of coincided with the whole shift in music, and in the way our society has gone in terms of music and the arts, entertainment. And I think that if you look at, especially in America, once the whole streaming thing came in, and YouTube came in, and the iPhones came in the mid 2000s, then that kind of was the new thing, the new addiction, and people stopped going to concerts as much. The music industry, once the downloading happened and all of that pulled a lot of the profits out of the music industry. A lot of the small labels closed down. And, and then we were in the Bay Area, and when the tech industry moved in, that pushed all the music out, and all the clubs closed and everything. And so, Melissa music was life to her. And it was just constant music. And once it became pretty apparent that in our society, it's not as bad in Europe, it's much better in Europe, but in America, that it's just all these bands are still just scrapping to try to get the shows and stuff like that, and that the audience is shrunk down to half of what it was, and people just don't go to concerts as much anymore. People realize there's no way you're gonna make it. If you're a musician, you're not gonna make it anymore. There's no chance that you're gonna get signed by Warner Brothers, and that you're gonna be opening for Prince or whatever it is. That's just it's not even possible anymore. And so that whole industry is just completely crashed, and the whole culture around music has not died, but a lot of it has died. And so Melissa was from another age, and I feel like I'm someone who can I kind of feel like I had my music career, and I still play, but I kind of feel a little bit satisfied. Like, I don't necessarily have to be a professional musician for the rest of my life anymore. Whereas Melissa, it wasn't like that. It was like, this is all she really wanted to do. Right. And so when it became apparent, after trial and error for 10 years, to get our music off the ground and stuff, and we kind of just saw the way things were going in the world of music, it was kind of like Melissa's time was gone. It was past. It was like another era, the era of, she was kind of from the 60s and 70s, kind of the era of avant-garde music and arty stuff, and Peter Gabriel, and just all this arty stuff. Somebody like Kate Bush could actually become famous. It's like in the 70s and 80s. It's like that. Right. And so her time was kind of gone. And so I think that was also kind of part of why her soul decided to just kind of jump, because it was just like this was the end of her time, and it's just the only way I can really explain it. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing all of that.
Sure.
And
yeah.
As someone who never met her in this incarnation,
Yeah.
hearing the storytelling, the mythology of who she was,
Yeah.
Thinking about her music and the impact that it has, and the work that you both have done with the shadow work as well. Again, for those that are just tuning in now, it's shadowtechalchemy.com. We're discussing Melissa Mari, Mari music.com. I just I'm thinking about, okay, so you were talking about the sort of cultural angle of like why people aren't doing their shadow work and why we have this sort of like larger sort of like Western,
Yeah.
more ill society,
Yeah.
and how like people are sort of resistant to doing that work. Um, what are your thoughts on the idea? I mean, you pretty much answered the question I'm about to ask, but maybe you can add to this idea that um, I feel like music, art in general, pairing that with one's healing process and
Yeah.
journey, that just feels like a natural, like we've been talking about alchemy.
Right. Well, art definitely is part of human psycho-spiritual healing. Definitely, always has been, and in fact, it's sort of one of the most kind of reliable ways of doing shadow integration is the actual physical process of making art out of your woundedness, let's say, or whatever is your version of the shadow, whatever is in your shadow, and your darkness, so to speak, and putting it into art. The cathartic process itself of making art is an integration process, and it makes you feel better, and it is a healing thing to do. And then it's also healing for other people to see people's art that was created through the energy or the impulse to heal and to process their darkness through creation of art. So other people see that and they detect that and they're like, okay, and it might come through symbolically, but that is, for back to music, heavy metal music, for example, is a way. It was mainly, it's more women are in it now, but for all these years, it was, angst-filled teenagers, teenage boys that were into it, and they were pissed at the world and pissed at their parents and stuff, and didn't want to go get sucked into the church thing and all of that. And they're like, fuck this, fuck the world, fuck you. And it was the same kind of energy that was in punk music. And so there's kind of like two kind of strains of this sort of industrial modern, music, heavy, angry music that let young men displace their natural aggression and rage. And so that's what that was and is. And that is the shadow work, So people actually go to these concerts, and they, get to be part of this kind of very ritualistic, cathartic therapy, basically. And but I think, when you start to, as long as the art, whether it's art and music, kind of keeps the intellectual side of it kind of subliminal, kind of, as long as it's in the lyrics and people don't really have to, it's not like reading a psychology book, reading the lyrics. It's like reading some kind of poetry and the stuff is in there, but it's not really explicit. Then it can go in one ear and out the other, and it can kind of be kind of processed lightly by the psyche and not really focused on. That's kind of the arty way of putting, healing information into music. Or as long as, with visual art, it's got, there's pictures of, you see, in terms of the shadow, it would be darker stuff like demons and stuff like that, or whatever, or it would be, people crying or whatever. And as long as it's kind of abstract, then people will take it in and it'll go there. But once you start being explicit about it, like, yeah, this is what my music is about, and it's about the shadow, and it's about healing, and it's about how screwed up our society is, and blah, blah, and you make it more explicit, and you make it more like a lecture or whatever, I think people actually are naturally turned off by that, because they're kind of saying to themselves, you know, I go to a music concert to get away from all that stuff. To get away from all that. I go to a music concert to just let go and, you know, have some beers or whatever, and not be, you know, having to be hit with all of this information and stuff. It's kind of like just it's a people want art to stay art. And if you go into the world of if you're part of if you're a musician or you're in that world, you know very well that people don't like people mixing politics into their music. That is a kind of postmodern woke thing to do, but traditionally people don't like that. And they don't, and in fact, music lovers and musicians are often don't know a lot about politics and don't care, and they want it, they don't want it, they don't want to be involved. And the same thing goes for other intellectual subjects, is they kind of just want the music to be a release and not to bring them back into the heavy real world and stuff.
Right.
So, you know, that said, you know, punk music was political. Right. Punk music was and is political. And so there is a place for it. There is a place for it. And there are political metal bands and political all kinds of bands and stuff. But in general, I think people kind of don't really want the real world stuff. And they don't want to be reminded of their pain. They want to, you know, be able to sort of cathartically work through it.
Good vibes only. Yeah.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, definitely. Kind of good vibes only kind of a thing. Definitely. Yeah. And so that is like a problem that we face in trying to merge art and music into these other areas.
I would love to play another song.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah. So since we're talking about music and sort of like politics or the sort of greater collective, I thought Resist All Tyranny.
Yeah, that's like a Red Pill song that we put out during COVID, I think, or second year of it or something. Go ahead.
Here we go.
They are the weak ones in this game. They are the ones who are insane. They know not the maker of this game. The game of evolution. Take off the mask, don't believe the lie. The virus is a new world order crime. Wake up to a new reality of who you have always been, who you will always be. Brilliant, sovereign, and free. Time to resist all tyranny. Don't be a zombie and follow their scheme. Time to resist all tyranny. It's your God-given right to be. It's your God-given right to be sovereign and free. Time to resist all tyranny. Don't be a zombie and follow the scheme. Time to resist all tyranny. It's your God-given right to be. It's your God-given right to be. It's your God-given right to be sovereign and free.
sabotaging culture, learning how to manipulate people, engaging in deception is cancer. It's knowledge of evil. It's a virus. It manipulates systems that already existed and causes entropy and collapse. It does not progenerate. It does not fount. It does not found. It is not a source. It is not a creator. It is not a builder. They are collapsers.
Time to resist all tyranny. Time to resist all tyranny. Take off the mask. Don't believe the lies. The virus is a new world order thrive. Take off the mask. Don't believe the lies. The virus is a new world order thrive. Take off the mask. Don't believe the lies. The virus is a new world order thrive. Take off the mask. Don't believe the lies. The virus is a new world order thrive.
Guys like Fauci get up there and start talking, he doesn't know anything really about anything, and I'd say that to his face.
Excellent ending. And this video you shared was taken off YouTube.
Yeah, remember when the COVID thing was happening and YouTube was taking down anything that talked about the virus or whatever. It was just, I don't know, they flagged it and took it down, so we had to put it on Vimeo. But I don't think that won't happen now.
Yeah,
that won't happen now. I'll put it back up on YouTube now. But yeah, so yeah, Melissa was always political and stuff, but it was tucked in there. This one is very, very overt.
Yeah. No, I can understand why they would want it taken off during that time.
Right.
Yeah. We have one more song, and I want to go back to what you said before regarding sort of Melissa's process and journey with letting go of attachments. And we have a song called Let It Go. Would you like to talk more about the song or the
she's
song that we
Persephone in that song, actually, in that video.
Wow.
Yeah, and I could tell you that there's the thing about Persephone. We found out, we were constantly, because in Jungian psychology, you go look for the archetypes. The archetypes are like are ancient patterns of psychic organization and behavior that are in us, that are beyond us. They are collective patterns, and so they influence all people. But cultures, we organically create and recreate images of these patterns in our mythology. So if you go back, like for example, and you look in the West, and you look at in the different civilizations, like from Sumeria and through all the different Mesopotamian civilizations, and then you go into Greek and Roman civilization, you'll see these gods and goddesses sort of showing up and then being reformed and in new ways. And so it'll be like, there's different versions of the goddess, different slices or views of the goddess, and there's different views and slices of the masculine god, and all kinds of trickster gods and all kinds of things that are in there, and they just present themselves. And as the psyche evolves of mankind, then it reimagines these patterns anew. And they're also related to the context of that society. What kind of a society is it? Is it a warrior society? Is it kind of, like a peaceful society that's not threatened in any way, or is it a seafaring society, or is it desert, or whatever kinds of society? They will manifest different kinds of gods and goddesses and archetypal mythological images. And so so Persephone is the Greek goddess, and she was the daughter of Demeter, who was sort of there's different versions. There's like Gaia, and then which is sort of the Earth Mother, but then there's the agricultural mother, Demeter, and there's her daughter, Persephone, and so the story is that Hades, who is the god of the underworld, because every civilization has a myth of Hades, of an underworld, of some kind of a devil, a demon, and every mythology has that. And so the Greeks had Hades, and he lives in the underworld, and he basically abducts Demeter's daughter Persephone, takes her down there. And then Demeter gets so pissed, that she says, "Well, I'm just going to stop all agriculture, all plant growth until I get my daughter back." And so there's this big argument, up in what do they call the Greek version of what is it called, of
Mount
heaven?
Olympus.
Yeah, but the where the whole pantheon of gods lives.
Right.
And Zeus says, okay, well, I'll talk to Hades about it and we'll work it out. And so but then what Hades says, okay, you can have Persephone back, but then Hades does a little trick. And the trick is, if there's an old rule in the world of the gods, that if you partake of a fruit of a certain dimension, that dimension will always be with you forever. And so Hades gives her the pomegranate fruit, and she eats the pomegranate fruit before she leaves to go back home, in the deal that was made with Zeus and Demeter. And so what that means is that it's kind of a she ends up she's half in Hades and half in the upper world. And so it was kind of a way for him to kind of trick her. And it explains this myth explains the seasons, and why you have growth in the spring and the summertime, and in the fall and the winter you have death. And so basically Hades rules. Hades has Persephone during the winter time. During the fall and winter, Hades has her, and then Demeter has her back up on Earth, in the spring and summertime, and that explains the seasons and stuff. Well, that explanation explains the seasons, but it also explains the cycle of life itself that's going on, not just with all creatures, but it's going on psychologically inside of us, and how that we're all kind of experiencing these cycles of life and generativity. And then we crash, and then we have a little dark night of the soul, a little death, a negrito period where we reconstitute, and we have to remake ourselves, and we have to figure out what went wrong, and then we remake ourselves, and we come back into the world with some new life. And this is going on throughout all of our life. We're constantly going in these different stages. And so the Jungians will go and look for these different mythological stories and these characters to see which ones explain their, our psychological, our behavior and our psychological nature. And so, we're trying to figure out what is this cycle with Melissa, where she's just constantly doing this thing. Like every 5 or 6 or 10 years, she has another cycle, and she dips down, and it's like just constantly going, and it's like predictable cycle. And we're like, what archetype is running this? And at first we're like looking at the Cinderella story, because that's related. But then we figured out, oh, it's Persephone. It's Persephone that's doing this. And so we we figured that out. And this song was originally called Letting Go of the Program. And the program is the cycle, the Persephone cycle that's had Melissa her whole life. And she was just like, when can I finally let go of this program? And she never was able to let go of the program, actually. And so what was so just incredible is that, well, this song that you're going to play is about Melissa and, working with that program and trying to let go of it, and how that Persephone was attached to her. But when Melissa died, she died on January 5th, 2025, and we had only been living in Texas for 4 years. She's a Bay Area girl, and we had both been out there. My family's from here, but we had been out there the whole time. We had all these amazing nature spots, but here in Central Texas, we didn't really have very many of them. It's a completely different terrain. But there was this one area in Wimberley, Texas, that had this really nice creek and all these cypress trees and all of this. And we used to go to that place. It's a real arty kind of town. And that was kind of our little spiritual little arty town that we could kind of go to and kind of feel connected again while we were out here. And we used to go out there. And so after Melissa died, the next weekend, I went out there just to kind of reconnect with that energy and, just to kind of, because I'm constantly doing that, it's just doing things to try to reconnect with Melissa's essence. But I did that the next week, and I went on this little hike, this trail, and that we usually go on, and then the trail ends, and then we would usually kind of just make our way out and backed up to the car or whatever. But I decided to keep going onto this road. There's a paved road at the end of it, and I was like, I'm just going to walk up here and see what else is up here. And I walked up and I hit this cemetery that we had never seen before. And I walked through the cemetery and I thought, wow, this is a really cool cemetery, because like the town, it's really arty, and people had really made all the gravestones really cool and put like cool stuff on them and stuff. It was really cool. And I was walking out of there and I looked to the left and I saw this gravestone, and the family name was Joy, Joy. And I was like, Joy. And I'm like, why that triggered me or whatever is a deeper story. But I looked over there, and then right behind that stone, I saw this white stone statue of Persephone.
Wow.
And now I didn't know it was Persephone. I did not know that statue was Persephone. I just saw this statue of this woman, a white statue, this woman in a gown, and she has a wreath of like flowers around her head, and she's like coming out of the ground, she's like, like Persephone coming out of Hades, and her head is looking up and all of this, and her arms are like this. And I just looked over at that thing and I said, that looks like Melissa from the Let It Go video.
Whoa.
And truthfully, I freaking forgot that how much the Let It Go video was about Persephone, because it was like 5 years behind us. And this is kind of what artists do. They're kind of like taking over, they do their thing, and then they're like, what? They kind of forget what it was really going through them. You know how it is?
Sure.
And so I was like, whoa, that looks like Let It Go. And I walked over there. I was like, oh my God, right? And then I was just like looking at it, and then I looked down, and there was a smaller stone on the ground at the feet that said Faith, had Faith carved in it. And Faith was Melissa's spiritual name. That was kind of her spiritual name, that we didn't call her Faith, but a lot of her like logins were Melissa is Faith, or this, that, and the other. And we were going to make a comic book about Will and Faith. I was Will, she was Faith, and we were going to put all of our stuff into a comic book, and we were going to make it about Will and Faith. And so Melissa was Faith. And so when I saw this statue, I was like, oh, and then I saw that it had the name Faith, and I'm like, what in the hell? I just started breaking up. I was like, oh my God, because I realized that the movie of life was generating this for me, this synchronicity. And it was like, you know, this. And then I posted the picture on Facebook to show people, look what just happened. And a friend of ours from Facebook world, Emma, she's in England, and she said, oh, that statue right there, that's Persephone. And she said,
Wow.
because I just bought a little miniature one of those just the other day. She ordered it online on eBay or something, and she shot a picture of it on her desk, and it was the exact same thing.
Whoa.
And I later found out that was a mold that people have been using since the 60s or 70s, and people have been making statues off of that shape for a long time, that particular version of Persephone. And then I went out and found my own little, you know, vintage Persephone statue like that. I ordered it from Italy or whatever, and got that. And so it was confirmed that was Persephone at that time. So that whole thing, and then the whole thing coming back to me of, oh my God, yes, we were totally talking about Persephone. It was all about Persephone, and then Persephone is faith, and blah, blah, blah. And so then what my sort of takeaway from the whole thing was this synchronicity, this sort of spiritual synchronicity that happened to me, where I was being shown, basically, Persephone was saying to me, I'm the one that ran this whole thing. This was all me. This was me. I was the one that was running the cycle Melissa's whole life. I'm the one, she's with me now. This was me the whole time. I am the archetype that was running this pattern in Melissa's life. This is what it is. It's me. And so I'm like, whoa, you know, and it's like like the Jungians will always talk about, you know, an archetype is way beyond anyone's ability to be able to argue it out of existence or whatever. If an archetype has you, an archetype has you. And that's how you get people who are so incredibly prolific and sort of just taken over. That's how you get the Christopher Columbuses and the Joan of Arcs and these, you know, heroes, is they're taken over by these archetypal spirits, these archetypal patterns from the collective unconscious, and those patterns are running them. And so Melissa was being run by Persephone. And so that is just, you know, and I'm just putting it all together. But this video that you're about to play now is kind of about that.
Whew, beautiful. All right, here we go. Let it go.
Isn't it
Yeah.
I I know that you've done a lot of healing um, with this
I'm
experience,
still going.
still ongoing.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah. Oh yeah. Not over it.
I was crying because I was just like it. It's true. Like there is renewal past loss. There really is, and it's like I'm discovering her music now
Mm-hmm.
posthumously, and I'm enjoying it, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
learning more about who she was and her
Mm-hmm.
legacy. And you're the steward
Yeah,
of her legacy.
I am.
And you are part of that renewal rebirth process through being a steward of her art and her work.
Yeah, but I'm kind of continuing what I was doing because it's been good to talk to to Mark Power, who is her boyfriend and bandmate from 1980, probably 3 to 87, something like that. And I interviewed him actually for this film, and he had the same experience with Melissa in that she was just a channel, and he was just there to kind of be like, okay, this is coming through her, and what can I do to put her on stage, give her equipment, make videos, whatever it is, this is the rock star, and so I was kind of like that with Melissa, and was in some ways it was kind of a shared thing with the psychology. I think I was more kind of articulate. I was more of a I was more articulate with sort of not being very articulate now, but I was able to sort of map and model psychological principles and put them into words. And Melissa was better with poetry and that kind of a thing. But so she kind of gave me kind of space she kind of just would just like be the receptacle for me to kind of dump a lot of philosophical information out. And then I would be the receptacle for her to do it with the music. And so we kind of just were partners that way. But we were both very involved. Without Melissa, adding to everything that I'm saying and thinking and challenging me and applying my ideas to her own reality and testing them and all of that, then, we couldn't have figured all this stuff out. And without me, she would have had all this talent, but she wouldn't have been able to put it into the world. She always needed some kind of a producer, somebody to actually, who has the technical skills to put this is a male female thing.
I'm laughing because that's pretty much John and my dynamic.
Yeah, that's just most most men and women are this is what it's like. So that's just what it is. Women have a different kind of natural biological skill set than than men are kind of like these engineer problem solver types, and women are from the male point of view, to really be honest about it, women are a kind of have always been a mystery to men, really, and how women operate and how they do what they do is always kind of trying to be figured out by men. And but every man who's honest about it knows that he cannot operate properly. He can't be whole. He can't become his highest self without a woman. There has to be a woman completely interfaced with his life for him to actually become, for him to grow up. And the same thing can be said for women need a man to be able to grow up and to mature. And so it goes both ways. But but we did this with each other, and so now I'm just continuing it on. It was always like with me and Melissa, it was always okay. So what song are we working on now? What song of all of her songs? Which one do you want to produce next? What do you want to do? Because we're going to take it like in. She would usually in the old days write songs on acoustic guitar. That's how it was always done. She would write it on an acoustic guitar, and she would sing and play the song. And then she would show it to the bandmates and be like, okay, this is how the song goes, and kind of this is how it is. And then they'd be like, oh, okay. And then they'd kind of figure it out, and the band they would collectively figure it out, and it would be turned into a song.
Right.
And so, but when we were doing things, we had iPads and MacBooks and stuff like that. And so what Melissa figured out early, within a year of us getting together, she got an iPad and with GarageBand built into it. And
Cool.
she went in a little music creation program, and she would go in there and program synth and drums and stuff like that in her iPad. And she'd make a simple song on the iPad, and then she would show it to me. And then I would take it off of her iPad, open it up in a bigger program called Logic. And then I would produce the whole song, and I would convert it over into a rock or metal song. And then we would sometimes get musicians to come over and play in the studio on it and all of that. Or I would play my parts on there. I'd play some different instruments, guitar, bass, usually backing vocals. We'd usually get a drummer. And then we produce it as a song and make a music video out of it, or maybe not, but make whatever. We made all kinds of stuff. And so it would be, what's the next song? What's the next thing? Or what's the next band we're putting together? Or what's the next gig we're getting, or whatever. And so I'm always just being her producer and be like, what's the next thing we need to do to get Melissa's music out and into the world and get her on stage? And so that's what I was doing. And that's what Mark was doing. That's what her other prior partners were doing. Although in her last band before our band, she kind of was more of the manager and kind of took over that role more. But yeah, so now I'm just doing the same thing. Now I'm just like, okay, so this is Melissa's body of work now. And so I'm putting it into the world. I'm making a movie about her. Probably going to write a book that's, more about our process together and stuff, and sharing her music. I have a bunch of unproduced material that's, hasn't been, I've got a lot of material that's.
Wow.
Well, I got crap loads of material that's only, it's her voice is already recorded into the audio. It's like she produced it on her iPad, then she sang on it, and then she put it up on Facebook Live or whatever. Those songs, I can't pull I can't pull them apart and put fresh drums and guitar on them and stuff. They're done. But I do have, I don't know how many songs, maybe 5 or something like that, maybe more, where we started producing them in the studio, and I have her vocals, and I just never completed the song. We went and did something else or whatever. And so I have material that I can redo, and I can get musicians to play on it and stuff. So I've got material I can put out. I actually kind of got material for days with Melissa. I could be, idolizing Melissa and putting out her stuff for the rest of my life, probably in some way. So,
wow.
I mean, in some way, I've got thousands of hours of us on video or audio talking, because I recorded everything. I always had this. I had this little white recorder. I don't have it right here. I have this little, this little recorder that we would just go on nature walks or just around the house or whatever. I would just be like, put it in front of her face. I'm just like, yeah, well, what were you saying? And just, record everything. And so our whole process of evolving ourselves and figuring out our own psychology and everything, I was recording it all. I was putting it on camera. I was putting it on audio. I can take an audio file of Melissa talking or of us talking, and then I can put sort of like etheric music or whatever behind it and turn it into some trippy art piece, So it's like I get stuff forever with, I can make with Melissa's spirit. So, I don't know, what I will do with that. I know right now I'm very inspired to really kind of solidify her kind of get all her old music together, get it all in one place. And, you know, right now, MelissaMariMusic.com is kind of the main site where I'm putting it. And then I got the Bandcamp page and all that. But so I'm just doing that, and the movie will come out probably. You know, I'm going to put it in, hopefully get it in a film festival or something, and then so at some point there will be like a chunk of this will be done. You know, in a few years,
Right.
I'll be like kind of like okay, and then I'll have to see kind of where I go with it and all of that. But I could potentially be making music and stuff for days with her stuff.
Love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we had talked also about maybe doing like a, you know, short video compilation of, you know, some of her work as a sort of in memoriam
Oh yeah.
experience.
Well, yeah.
But if
I
that's
got.
not ready, we
Well,
can.
no, I got a video for you.
Cool.
I got a video. I took one of our songs, "Not an Ordinary Life," and I for the memorial. We did her memorial in May in California, and so I produced some little videos for that. And so I have one that's about a 5-minute long, you know, basically music video out of, you know, video of her and just in life and everything. And I got another one with her childhood pictures and stuff. So I can send that over to you. So I got stuff for you.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So I know we're actually I have a meeting coming up in a couple minutes, so we kind of went over, but I love this conversation. I feel like we
me too.
covered a lot. We did a
did.
lot of healing, I hope.
Yeah, or we talked about healing.
We talked
I
about
don't know how much healing we did, but we talked about it.
I feel inspired
Mhm.
by everything you shared about your work together with Melissa, and
Yeah.
just I'm just so I'm just sensing that there was just this beautiful alchemical marriage between you guys where you were co-creating just prolifically, like spring
It
in a
was.
field,
It
just
was.
flowers and trees
It
just
was.
blossoming everywhere.
Yep.
Yeah.
10 of the 12 years, it was just pedal to the metal the whole time. And it was just very, you know, I would say also that before we go is that if anybody is in, you know, we talked a lot about psychology and spiritual healing and all of that. You know, when Melissa was still alive, I basically took, you know, everything that was in our first book and that we had learned and all of that, and I put it into a smaller book. And this book, Transforming Darkness, you can get it for free on shadowtechalchemy.com. Just go there, go to the books page, and you can download it. And you can just go to it. You know, there's a lot of theory in here and stuff, but you can just go to the chapter called Shadow Work Practices. There's a chapter in here called Shadow Work Practices, and I have like 30 shadow work practices in here. And they're divided up into different quadrants, actually. They're divided up into the integral 4-quadrant model, meaning there's ones that are like cultural shadow work, bodily shadow work, societal shadow work, or your lifestyle shadow work, and psychological shadow work, which is sort of the normal side of it. But I got that whole chapter, so people can just like go through that, just grab that, start looking at those practices, and just recognize that, you know, I put those 30 things in there, that all those things are things that Melissa and I are doing, or you know, are up to speed with, and that there are you know all I don't know if we have time to go through it or whatever, but we don't. But this is stuff from our experience. This isn't like, oh, hey, you know, I went and researched shadow work practices, and here's 30 practices or whatever this is from our life. This is what we were doing, and I'm still doing. And so you can just go through this and just check yourself and be like, how do I feel about these different things? Because some of this stuff is not just about doing psychological work like emotional processing or inner analysis or journaling or whatever, but it's it's about, you know, analyzing your lifestyle footprint and your job and stuff. And, you know, how is your business that you're running kind of parasitic and shadowy? You know,
Right.
are you working for a company that's just not, that's kind of corrupt or whatever, and you don't really like working for them, but you're afraid to leave the company. And so, you know, you're being a hypocrite in life. You know, how
Right.
are you being hypocritical in life? And so changing your actual lifestyle, your actual footprint to bring it into integrity,
Right.
you know, is a form of shadow work. And so
Absolutely.
you can go through all those practices and stuff, and you can be like, well, where am I in terms of this? And check yourself on those and start doing some of the ones that resonate with you, and just start getting on it. So,
Thank you so much,
yeah,
Colin. I really
you're
appreciate
welcome.
you coming on and sharing
My pleasure,
today.
Jerry. Yes, thank you very much, and have a great day. I'll talk to you
Awesome.
soon.
Bye-bye.
Okay, bye, everyone.